Okay, so we'll kick off. I'll just keep an eye on if anyone else is coming in. So thanks for those who are able to join in person. This is being recorded and I will send it around. So I'm Jo Rusco. I'm the CEO for the Barramundi Farmers Association, and we have some representatives from Good Fortune Bay and NC Harbour Line. And I also had interest from the Prawn Farmers Association. So leading the conversation today, so this was all kicked off conversations I've been having with Matt Brannelly from Orbit Switch. And Matt and I connected through Condobolin Fish Farm. So Mark Oliver, who's been a good friend of the industry. And that's how I met Matt. And we also have online, we have Ewan Beard, who is the broker that Matt works with in terms of he works with running market tenders. So just for people, I think it's also, I'll get you, Matt, to touch on also eligibility, that's not a given, and maybe touch on that with as part of your introduction. So I'll hand it to you now. Thanks.
Thank you, Jo, and thanks, Ewan, for joining me, and thanks to those that can make it online. As Jo said, I've been doing a lot of work around the Western Downs and met a number of businesses, cotton farmers, and one fish farmer, Mark, and explored this world of energy and energy cost. And very clear to everybody in business that energy costs are a problem. And we really discovered that for many people in what we refer to as the Ergon East region of the Ergon network, and I'll talk more about that later, we have found 15 to 50% savings by seeking alternative energy arrangements for them. Today's program, I'll take you through a quick intro, high level around my engagement and my understanding of what we found so far. Introduce Ewan, who's the broker I work with around the energy procurement tendering process, which is quite technical and quite critical to what I work on. And then I'll summarise with where do we go to from here, because I'm a big believer in taking some action, getting some benefit from these sorts of apparently good ideas, and I hope you'll find that. Thank you to Jo for taking some leadership and seeing the potential benefits in this for the members, because this is really all about you, not so much the association, but energy costs are politically topical. I think we found a very practical thing. All rural businesses in the Ergon East network can actually do themselves, and we'll take through a process which isn't that complicated. How did I get involved or become aware of this? I'm a Brisbane-based management consultant trained in economics and finance, which is a long way from knowing anything about fish farms or cotton farms or agriculture, to be honest. But I spent 15 years around energy as a management consultant, looking at cost-saving strategies, energy plans and risk management plans for business, mainly aged care, health, a lot of the fast food chains, deal with a lot of Domino's stores throughout Queensland. And that led me to do some work with some manufacturers. That led me to work with the Queensland Manufacturing Institute, QMI, which ran some projects out through Western Downs. That led me to work with about 100 manufacturers around Dalby and chinchilla, hence the introduction to Mark, who's on the other side of chinchilla. And I was doing some work with the manufacturing energy efficiency grants. So the state government had available $50,000 to help small business in manufacturing upgrade equipment, which is a great program. Many didn't know about it, so I did my best to communicate that out through the Western Downs region. And in that journey, I discovered that everybody I was speaking with had Ergon Retail energy bills, because in the project we needed to see bills as part of our evidence. And seeing all these Ergon bills, I reached out to people like you and I said, I know from our work with Domino's, where I look after 200 stores and they're scattered, we successfully moved a lot off Ergon into other places. And I thought that was normal. But once I started talking to businesses in that Western Downs region, I was quite, I won't say forcibly, but you probably know the term I'm thinking of, told that that was the only choice they had, and that's just the way it is. Luckily, I was talking to probably the largest energy user in Dalby, and I said to them, I think there's another choice, and they let us, with Ewan's team, run the tenders and go through the process. And lo and behold, to me, we came up with about a 30% savings which in dollar terms was about $400,000 a year, to which the manager of the business almost fell off his chair and asked me how long this has been around. And I didn't want to answer because it would have made him feel worse. But the market, the Ergon, I guess, business has done a good job of keeping the concept of choice very hush-hush. And frankly, no one apart from the very big members of particular sectors or industries knew there was any choice. So at Dolby Way, groups like Cotton Queensland, PCYC, I should say Queensland Cotton, they moved away some years ago. So that again gave me confidence that this was an opportunity. It's just no one knew. And so I wasn't afraid to raise the question. Once we'd done the job for that large, it was a steel smelter, very energy intensive. Then the local chamber found out about it, small towns of talk. And then we put a project together where we communicated through the Dolby and Chinchilla chambers of commerce that there was choice. And I probably spoke to another 50 businesses in that region about energy choice, many of whom were completely surprised. And the end result was we worked with abattoirs, quarries, aged care, lots of fabrication businesses, and the savings range from about 15%. The biggest saving was actually 50% for a quarry, which was $100,000 a year, and that was a private business. So we continue to get great results. There is a but in this process, and Joe rightly reminded me to bring it up. What I discovered, and Mark actually was the reason I discovered it, was that, and again, being a city bloke, I didn't understand my territories, but the moment we go west of Charleville, we fall into Ergon West. Now, there's no line on the map. This is not anything that's to do with geography. Ergon have carved up the Queensland Territory in some way, and it seems to be a line that runs from the eastern side of Charleville straight up north, so to speak. So the good news is, and this is why Joe's aware of it, most of the barramundi farming and prawn farming happens in the coastal areas, which is definitely Ergon East, except if you're up in the Cape and too far north, it drops back to being west. So provided you're in Ergon Ergon East, as most of you are, what we're going to talk about today is relevant. Ergon West has a very, I'll say, difficult or very high tariff structure, which is where we get caught out when we look to run this sort of analysis. I've asked Ewan to delve into that a little bit further, just to sort of show you what goes on behind the scenes in our world. We'll always check the tariffs clients should be on or are on, because the moment you've got 100,000 kilowatts per annum energy use, say $30,000 a year, then you qualify for a large market contract. And as those large market contracts, we can go to tender from other retailers and come up with what's normally cheaper pricing, which is a combination of the retail price from the retailer and the Ergon tariff, because you're still clients of Ergon. No one else is supplying the energy. It's just the retailer that does the billing changes from Ergon Retail to an AGL, an Origin, or somebody else. So it's purely changing the way you get your billing through the top, with Ergon being the supplier. And Ergon recovers its costs through its tariffs, which are complex and varied when we get into this commercial tariff space. Part of leading edge's role for me is making sure our analysis of the tariffs is accurate. So there's a bit of science to it, but at a high level, if you're in Ergon East, as I believe most are, and you're using over 100,000 kilowatts per annum, everything we're about to speak about is relevant. Just where your savings land will depend upon lots of variables, because each of the energy retailers will price your business individually based on where you are, what we call the low profile, which is how you use your energy through a 24-hour cycle. So I've learned, unlike manufacturing, which runs daylight hours, you guys and businesses will run 24/7 sometimes because you're pumping. So that's quite a unique energy profile, which is fine. Our job is to find energy retailers that will price that load attractively. And that's sort of what we do. So that's the Ergon East, Ergon West story. I'm a consultant advisor, trained in economics and finance. As an analyst or a consultant, I look to find solutions for clients around energy problems. and I've got a panel of experts I use. In the world of energy procurement, which is the contracting of energy, which is a new concept to people in the Ergon patch, because you don't have contracts, you just get your energy supplied every month and pay for it. But in the commercial non-Ergon world, you can actually enter into contracts for 2, 3 or 4 years, and there's more of a science around how you contract, length of term. You've got a lot more options to consider. And that's where in my energy advisory process, I first get data. We need to know your data. So we get in-all data from Ergon. That tells us your load profile in 50-minute increments over a 12-month period. And therefore, we've got details of how you spend your energy. And I get a form for you guys to sign, which is an authority to get data from Ergon. It takes a few weeks. And once we get it, I pass it on to Ewan's team. They run the market tenders, run the analysis, look at the tariffs, and compile a very detailed pricing analysis. And as a consultant/analyst, that's what I need to see. And then we present that back to the client, with a recommendation to either stay where you are or to look to change. And I'm going to get Ewan to go into a case study that we did for one of my clients and just step you through what actually happens in that process. And then I take all that data and I create an energy insights report. So I like to look for solutions. Getting access to cheaper energy is the simplest way of saving money on a power bill, clearly, because you're simply buying energy from a cheaper supplier. And once you know that's possible, then we can proceed to go down that journey of energy procurement. I'll then write a report up around monthly energy use, what we call peak demand, when you're using most of your energy, because that's relevant to what other things can we do to save energy, which is where I get into looking at other opportunities, other projects. In my world with my agricultural rural clients, I'm always looking for grants because capital is always hard to get. I don't care who you are, unless you're very big and have got plenty of deep pockets. So the manufacturing grant was great for manufacturing, no good for fish and prawns. But I have heard, thanks to the new government with a Toowoomba-based treasurer, there is a move to bring in some funding around agriculture and timber in the next process that's being delivered, I think in the next month. And so hopefully in the early part of next year, Joe, this is something for you. We are hoping to see some agricultural stimulus for agriculture in general and also timber. So that'll be new. So hopefully that'll help us all. And with my clients in the world of fish, I seem to keep my eyes open for those grants and communicate once I see something that might be relevant, because I've got an insight into what sort of equipment's using energy, which I know is going to be pumps. And then we can look at, what sort of better pumps can we apply to save energy? Takes money, that's where grants are handy. And that's sort of the process that I take clients through. It's energy procurement first, then a little bit of value add around what should we be thinking about doing later, subject to funding. At this point, I'm going to introduce Ewan, who I've been working with for 4 or 5 years. He probably had hair when we started, trying to deal with all my clients. So Ewan at Leading Edge, and I'll let Ewan tell his own story. Leading Edge is a national energy procurement expert. That's all they do. It's a new area of expertise, relatively speaking. And certainly I find with my rural clients, because they had no choice, they didn't know there was anybody out there to help them make a decision because they never asked. So Leading Edge is a broker, will run the tenders, analyse the tariffs, and Ewan's going to take us through a case study of one of my clients and get into some of the details around the energy market, including some forward contracting, which is looking at energy forward, much like agricultural people do with pricing contracts for their products. So Ewan, over to you, and you can educate us all about what you guys do.
Sure. Thanks for the introduction, Matt. Yes, look, I've been with the company for 9 years. I head up the sales team here at Leading Edge, and on this topic, looking at Ergon, it's something I have a lot of experience with. We've been really working up there in the Ergon East part of the network for 6 or 7 years now, and basically driving savings to those businesses consistently. So just before I go on to the case study, I just wanted to touch upon some key stats that I have just based on our current client portfolio. So we are currently managing 200 electricity suppliers up in the Ergon network. Just looking back at historical figures, we've saved $2.6 million in total energy costs for those businesses and ongoing. Okay, that's their annual savings for those businesses. On average, those savings are basically 14% on total energy cost. Okay, so it is quite normal up in the Ergon eastern part of the network, and it tends to be more common in the city hubs for businesses to have switched away from Ergon. Okay, and that's really down to consultants working up there and driving these market options to them, doing the analysis and presenting the results accurately. Okay, I will add that there's not always savings. It does depend on a few things, but we as consultants will run that analysis. There's been a handful of customers up there that we've said no, hang on, you're better off staying with Ergon. Okay, so moving on to an agricultural business that we've worked with recently, just to go over some recent figures. They had 3 electricity accounts, all with Ergon. We ran a competitive tender. We go out to about 18 retailers. In the Ergon patch, typically we'll get 5 or 6 retailers come back with market offers. Okay. For this business, we saved, it was 15% savings. So this is in the recent market in comparison to Ergon's recent rates, which for that business is $18,000 a year of annual savings. Now, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the rate increase notices that come from Ergon once per annum. And so that can be for your home bill, for small business, or if you're a large business. And that's really rate changes based on events that happen in the energy market. If the market's increased, the rates are going to go up. But it also accounts for transmission and distribution increases, often CPI increases, as well as other components of energy cost, which I'll go into a bit later. And so with Ergon, you really become a price taker. They've got their retail plans, and they change those rates once per annum. And as I'm sure you're aware, often they go up more often than they would go down. So with this agriculture business, we've presented 6 retail offers. There were options for the business to fix in energy rates for 12 months or as long as 48 months. Okay. And in this energy market, as I will touch upon later, it is a serious benefit to be able to effectively fix in your position, to hedge your position in this market and protect yourself from what is a very volatile energy market, particularly looking back over the past 3-4 years. Okay. Now, to explain Ergon and some of the objections that we get, I will do a screen share just for a moment. So just give me 1 sec. Okay. Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Yep.
So the first objection that we receive is really switching away from Ergon. And the first thing to understand is that whilst you are changing away from Ergon, you remain on the Ergon network. Okay, so Ergon is really split into 2 factions, and one is Ergon Retail. Okay, one is Ergon Network. Now, we are not going to be able to switch you away from a network or transmission and distribution. If there were outages or damages to poles and wires or supply, this relates to Ergon Network. Okay, and so there will be no changes to that relationship. You are just as safe in terms of supply, whether you're with Ergon Retail or whether you're with Origin Energy or AGL, etc. In fact, a vast majority of your electricity costs are still going to be passed to Ergon network. And that is because you are effectively, no matter where you are in the grid, whether you can see it or not on your bill, you are paying most of, typically 50 to 70% of your energy bill goes to the network operators. Okay. If anybody has any questions, they're welcome to jump in as I go through this. Okay. So just going back, this is just for a report for one of this customer's electricity accounts. And what I just wanted to highlight, I'm not going to go into through every page on this report, but with Ergon's tariff plans, their retail tariffs, they're what we refer to as a bundled rate plan. Okay. And these are very normal for residential, it's standard. For small business, it's standard, and that is all across Australia, WA. It's what we call bundled billing, or often referred to as mass market billing. Now, customers, when they go over a certain volume of electricity, as Matt stated, which we can roughly say is 100,000 kilowatt hours across Australia, they typically become a classified large market energy user. And that's when they start looking at these market retail contracts. In Ergon, it's been it's still a regulated market there for the most part. It was made, I guess, semi-deregulated, and for larger energy users up in the Ergon patch, they had access to large market electricity contracts. In fact, now even there are small market energy retailers starting to price up there. So effectively, it would appear that Ergon is slowly giving up its retail business as the likes of Origin Energy and other retailers enter that market for small users as well. So Ergon's bills are pretty simple. You typically will have 4 line items or four rates on those bills. Okay. Now, what I wanted to just show you is what most large market users in Australia would have as a bill. Okay. And that is a breakdown, really, of what we call an unbundled bill. And it really breaks down all of the charges that are hidden in behind a bundled bill. And this goes for your home bill as well. Okay, so residential bills have the same breakdown of costs hidden in behind. So there's energy rates. Okay. There are network, which is the transmission and distribution. And as you can see here, they're a pretty significant cost in comparison to the energy. There are levies for environmentals, so for large-scale generation system and small-scale generation. There's market charges that go towards the Australian energy market operator, albeit very small. And in the large market, you're also paying for smart metering, which is a slightly higher cost than what it is if you're a small business customer, and that's due to testing and compliance of meters. Okay. I have got a sample bill here for a customer, and this is actually up in Cairns. Okay. This customer is on a very good energy contract from before the energy crisis, so that their rates are about to increase as well. But as you can see, there's retail, slightly different order. There's environmental, network charges, market operator charges, and metering charges. So you are looking at a more complex energy bill, moving away from Ergon. However, it is standard in the market, and really what it's doing is giving you the breakdown of costs, which is where consultants like us come in to help you run that assessment for what is really going from a simple to a complex structure. Okay. Okay, so Ergon Retail we've covered, Ergon Networks covered, small market versus large market billing we've just covered. Matt touched upon Ergon East versus Ergon West. It's a interesting topic. It's always been the case in Ergon. However, Ergon's retail plans are a one size fits all. So it doesn't matter if you're in the east or west, based on your connection type and customer size, you just get a retail tariff. And that retail tariff has a supply charge. And whether you're east or west, it's the same supply charge. Now, the supply charge comes from the network. Okay, it's this service charge here, and the issue with Ergon West is that supply charge is significantly higher. Okay, and so they basically subsidise it. So if there's anyone on the call that has any businesses in the Ergon West, it's really not a viable option. It will be a cost increase because that will go to $200 and something a day. Okay, but I think most of you are in the east, so I can certainly assure you that there's plenty of savings available here. So just touching on a bit more about the energy markets. Just give me one sec. So Australia's electricity market, I've got a simplified graph here for you guys, starting back in 2015, all the way to the most recent market prices currently. Okay, what we can see was our original energy crisis, where energy prices started to increase significantly in 2017, which was later dwarfed coming out of the COVID years in 2022 as Russia invaded Ukraine, and that kind of coincided with a bunch of market issues. Okay, so we saw some significant cost increases in 2022, and since then the market has really stabilised, albeit at a higher level, around $100 a megawatt hour in Queensland. Now, these market fluctuations impact Ergon customers if they're with them for retail. That's one of the reasons why their rates will change and increase once per annum. And they certainly can affect you in the large market as well if you're caught out, having to renew a contract at a very high point in the market. Okay. As I said at the beginning of this meeting, we've been working in Ergon for a long time, and over the years we consistently deliver significant savings. There is only a short period of time when we don't, and that's typically when there's an energy crisis and the market shoots up before Ergon's done their rate changes. But as soon as Ergon does their rate change in July, the savings are back. And so if we were looking at it as averages over a long period, the large market offers from Origin and AGL are typically going to be that 13, 14, 15% cheaper than Ergon's retail plans. Okay. This market is important. I mean, from this shot here, you can see that there is a lot of volatility in the market. And at the beginning, when I started, I was mentioning that we can look at long-term contracts. And that's what we do as a consultant. So we will really analyze energy markets. We talk our clients through it, and that's really for purposes to make them understand whether they should be looking towards short-term contracts, which may offer them more flexibility, or longer-term contracts, which really give them that security. Okay, and a lot in the manufacturing industry, as an example, where the electricity and gas costs can be such an important factor to their business, they tend to do two things. They tend to take long-term contracts, and they often sign these contracts in advance of the start date. And that's a really crucial strategy that we work on with businesses. So this is a futures market, and what it means is today I could go and negotiate contracts for large market customers for future start dates based on the future curves. Okay. Typically, we don't go too far into the future. However, during COVID, when electricity prices were really, really low, we were certainly doing that. We were helping businesses take advantage of long-term contracts. Whether or not they had a contract coming up for renewal, we were pushing them to market for future contracts, fixing it in. And those businesses that did decide to fix in during the COVID years for long-term contracts effectively avoided the energy crisis, okay, for the most part. That bill I was showing you earlier, that customer's coming off a contract from 2020, and that contract ends at the end of this year. What that means is they've effectively been buying energy at this price all through this period, and finally their contract's coming to an end, and they're having to renew their contract at a higher rate. Okay, that is really a positive. They're one of the last businesses coming off those low rate contracts. So the just another objection, which is a valid one for many customers. So I'm sure you've all heard this. It's always been known that should you switch away from Ergon, your Ergon may not accept you back if you don't want to remain with the retailer that you're on, and that is actually true for the most part. So I have seen cases when Ergon do allow customers to come back, but I really think they, for the most part, will block it. And so I don't look at that as a big risk personally, because it's really easy to do the analysis, and there's either savings or there isn't. If there is savings, and there is consistently savings over long periods of time, you can be with Ergon, but you're going to be paying a higher energy cost. So it's a much better business outcome to be negotiating with Origin, with AGL, Shell Energy, Energy Australia, and all of the other retailers that now price up in that market. You will get better contracted rates. You'll get better security. You will actually have better data from their energy portals, where you can make more informed decisions about further reducing cost. So whilst it is valid, yes, you probably won't be able to switch back to Ergon, nor will you probably want to. And that's why most businesses, once they've switched one account to Ergon, they typically don't go back to Ergon. They bring in new businesses, they get Origin contracts and AGL contracts, etc. Okay. The other, I guess, concern or risk is really just market volatility. When a retailer is changing their rates once per annum, they tend to be dealing with more averages of movement throughout that whole calendar year. When you're on a large market contract, you are contracting in on the market. If you are getting pricing on the 4th of January 2022, it's based on this price. If you went a couple of months later, it's going to be a higher price, and so on. So there are some cases when Ergon, if poorly managed, Ergon could beat your market contracts, and that's typically during extreme energy crises, which not many businesses get stuck in, and particularly when there's consultants managing it. Matt, did I miss anything? I was about to hand back to you. I probably talked for too long.
No, it was a good summary, Ewan. Anybody online have any additional questions for Ewan around the state of the energy market? For God's sakes, don't bring up renewables. I'm sure you love talking about wind farms going into the tableland and that sort of stuff. So, Joe, any queries that come to your mind, having heard this once from me before?
No, just I guess more it's setting the scene of what does it mean around a group electricity opportunity.
Yeah, so Joe, you jumped to phase 2, but that's all right. So as I've got a Chamber of Commerce background, so I'm, as in 40 years worth of being in Chambers of Commerce and running them and setting them up. So I'm very strong on community engagement, in this business community engagement. And whilst the larger businesses of 100,000 kilowatts per annum have access to these large markets, which is what Ewan has been showing us, and all the clients we typically deal with are those larger energy consumers, which I think most of the Barramundi growers will be. Now, once we've established that this is a viable model, and we know it's working like it should, then we say to groups, whether it's Barramundi or whether it's a Chamber of Commerce, we can then expand the horizon and say, well, we've got we know this concept's working in your region. We've got a lot of businesses that might be between 50,000 kilowatts a year and 100, which don't ordinarily qualify for the large market contracts. Now, what we've learned to do is to blend some of our larger clients with some smaller clients into a group contracted rate. So it's like a group rate, individual contracts still. So businesses still have their own contracts, but we get the retailers to agree to price the group of, say, 5 large ones and 5 smaller ones together, and we get one rate for the entire group. The advantage of that is to the smaller businesses who otherwise wouldn't qualify, much like group buying of any commodity. And so as we get a couple of, your members on board and we begin to establish our load profiles, see what retailers are attracted to your load profile, and as you begin to think about other businesses in your networks that are below the 100,000 threshold, then we can work towards creating a group environment where we're contracting for a group, not just single individual pricing. And ultimately, say in 1 or 2 years' time, when we've got 6 Barramundi farms or 10 Barramundi farms, we can then begin to price up all those 6 or 10 members as a single entity from a pricing point of view. So we can then go to the retail and say, hey, rather than just pricing up 6 individual businesses, which is what we do in the beginning, we say to the market, hey, we've now got data on 6 Barramundi farms. We want to go to market on behalf of all 6 together and have a grouped together contract on not a 200,000 kilowatt business, but on a megawatt business. And so that's where grouping becomes an advantage to the bigger, larger businesses, and also some of the smaller ones we can blend into that program, which there's a lot of work in it from our side to pull that together. But that's exactly what I've done for 150 Domino's stores, who are all 100,000 kilowatt type size businesses.
And if there was a company with several sites, so the opportunity there would be to get a rate that's based on a company rather than a site?
Correct.
Exactly.
So we apply some intelligence. So yes, so where a company's traditionally, the retailers don't like doing it, they'll just price the sites individually, because guess what? They maximise price. When we see, in my world, an aged care operation with 10 sites throughout Queensland, we group all 10 together, and that's one contract. They still get individual bills for each site for accounting, but when we go to tender, we tender that as one business with multiple sites. And so immediately, if you've got a multi-site Barramundi farming operation, they'll get some immediate scale advantage, because we'll actually group up their sites together and present it as one. So they get scale themselves. So the answer is yes.
So just for my brain, so there's 3 potential opportunities. There's an opportunity here for an individual company that's has a large
already
use,
large, yes,
to negotiate directly with you and do it on their own as one large business. And there's an opportunity for for companies to negotiate on several sites. And then the third opportunity is a group of smaller, maybe one site farms, to be able to negotiate as a group. Is that correct?
Yeah. And the fourth one is we then blend some of those subgroups together. But yes, you're on the right track, because it's all about buying power. And the key to a group is common load profile. And of course, Barramundi farms, I imagine, would have similar load profiles between them. So compared to Barramundi farming versus some other business.
And what activity has there been around doing a group buying on a regional basis? So
none. No, it's too hard. To be blunt, it's too hard, and it gives you more grey hair. Grouping is the most complex thing we do, because there's a lot going. It's like Joe running the association. Doing it for one member on the side is one thing. If somebody says, "Oh, Joe, can you do something for 15 members?" You know where that leads. So through my Chamber of Commerce work, I am trying eventually to work that way. So anything is possible if we get enough engagement, to be honest, because in theory it can be done as long as our load profiles are similar within the businesses within the region.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So businesses that trade 9 to 5, for example.
I'll be quiet now and let other people ask questions.
Shouldn't have opened the door, should I?
Just going back to the grouping stuff, you said the initial contract would potentially be priced individually, noting that if there was entities that were small, you could access they could bump up into the large and contestable market. Would you then, if there was appetite from everyone, would you then, after the first contract, look to try and bundle the total usage and get a I'm trying not to let Ewan answer these questions, because he'll shut me down because I'm making more work for him. But
what I would be suggesting and trying to get Ewan to agree to this, so Ewan, don't say anything. If Joe, through the group we had, so we had 3 or 4 or 5 prawn farms, say, yep, let's begin investigating this process with Matthew, which by the way costs nothing. So personally, you should all jump in, let us do our work. It's on our time, not on yours. And in theory, and I'll couch that to keep Ewan happy, in theory, if we got data back on 3 or 4 or any number of farms, we can go to the market on behalf of 4, 6 farms now from the beginning and do a group price across the initial foundation number of farms, call it that. Start with 3 or 4 together, and we'll go to the market, try and get a price for the group of the 4 or 5 and that you can all benefit from, because rather than just being a 200,000 kilowatt business, all of a sudden we're going to market for a 1 megawatt business. And then the 4 farms just get the benefit of a cheaper rate because you've got scale. So we can, because you are an association, we can get you guys and ladies to act together, because we can get moving at the same time. If I'm just dealing with Mark out at Charleville, he's on his own and he's not part of the group, so to speak. It's too hard to juggle people, but in this network, we could easily get the first group of interested people, whether it's 2 or 4, doesn't matter. And we can run a collective price, is probably a better way of saying it, a collective pricing agreement to get a better price for the people keen to pursue it. The good news is, because you're in Ergon, you don't have any current contracts. So it is the best time, and Chris, you're probably thinking this through, the best time to do this is at the beginning of this journey or at the end of the first term, which will be between 2 and 3 years, depending on what term you take. So we can do it up front, which is much easier, because that way we get 3 or 4 into the first deal. We structure a term, 2 years or 3 years. And then over time, as we get the next interest, we then add the newbies into the group towards the end of the term, or we create a little second group with the second intake. Think of it like an intake into a training program. So you could end up with 2 or 3 subgroups based on when people get motivated that eventually, come into one. So I'd be pushing to try and get as many people to show interest up front. So when I go away with you and help to run the analysis, get the data, we'll bulk you up from day one and start off with a higher volume across 2 or 3 or 4 farms from day one. And if we do that, we could almost add in a couple of, if there are any smaller farms that have got sub 100,000, you could at that point vend them in as well.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So it's just about motivating to get the group to get some information back to me, and it's literally a bill per NMI. From some of the cotton farms I've been speaking to, they got lots of NMIs. Perhaps some of you Barramundi farmers have likewise got quite a few energy accounts because of all your pumps. It's just one of those bills for each NMI, and some authority forms, and that's sort of when we start, getting data and building the story as to what those low profiles look like.
So in terms
there's definitely power in the group, which I guess was Joe's point. Not everyone can use a group, but if you're in an association or a chamber, you've naturally got a group around you, so it makes sense to try and harness your colleagues if you can, to get them steering the one direction at the one time. And because there's no contracts in the market at the moment, you've got a good time to bring everybody along and sort of get them in the front of it, so to speak.
Jessica, did you have a question?
I did. I was just wondering, because we operate 2 different farms and we do have electricity bills for each pump, but we also seem to also have 2 providers, and I'm new to the business, so I'm not sure why we got into this situation, but do you guys know Progressive Green or Flow Power?
Ewan loves Flow Power.
Yeah,
you want to answer that one, Ewan? They're just retailers, so we do the same process regardless. We just take data, go to market. We can. I will let Ewan answer that question properly, but we can certainly compete with places like Flow Power. Ewan, do you want to talk to that in any more detail?
It's not a contract then with them, because I just was concerned we were in a contract, but maybe not. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I'd have to check.
If you're with Flow Power, you will be under a contract, but that's not a problem. That we still push you to engage, because outside of Ergon, This is all we deal with. Every business I deal with is under a contract. If they're not, they're doing something very wrong. So it's standard. As part of our process, we will review your contracts, and like I was saying earlier, we are in an energy market and it is a futures market. So that contract might be ending at the end of this year. It might be ending in 3 years' time. We will often be engaging with you not to break that contract, but to prepare for the next contract. And you might find it annoying, but I might be in touch with you 18 months before the contract ends because the energy market's at a low point.
When you showed the grid, or the graph, it was quite interesting because I was kind of wondering, how do you see the future of electricity? Are we looking at still continuing up, or are we hoping to go down in the next few years? What's pricing potentially going to look like?
Oh, look, the energy market will always go up and down. A long-term trend will be that it probably will, in the next 5 years, go up as a total cost item, not necessarily an energy market. And that's, I'm not going to delve into the political side of it, but with the renewable energy transition, there's a lot of cost that comes along with building out transmission. We used to have very few power stations that would supply the whole grid, and now we've got very many that are all over the grid and waiting to be connected because they're small aggregated solar farms and wind farms. So I expect energy costs to continue to I guess, blow out. The retail market is likely over time to become cheaper as we get more solar and wind come in, but it's going to be up and down because as soon as you get more solar and wind come in, you push out a coal plant and then the market goes up. And so we're going to be it's going to be a roller coaster as it has been for the last 9 years. It's going to continue.
So just this week in Queensland, we saw that, is it AGL owns Stanwell, one of our big power stations? They brought forward the shutdown of, you probably saw this, they brought forward the shutdown of one of our biggest, it's the Gladstone power station. It was to be shut down in 2030, it's now going to be shut down 2020, maybe 2030, not 2035. So that just gives the market the yips, because once we lose that generation, unless we've got wind and solar and batteries to replace it, which it can't, by the way, we're going to get push up in demand, which is going to push up pricing. So it's a challenge.
Locking it now is a good idea, potentially.
Again?
Well, locking the prices at the prices now is not a bad idea, considering then.
Correct. And you get budget certainty, which is a whole new thing when it comes to energy traditionally for people in the Ergon patch.
Yeah, and just touching again on Flow Power, you've gone from Ergon, which is a simple small market retailer, to Flow Power, which is one of the most complex retail models out there.
We have both.
Yeah.
Just to make
Flow Power
interesting.
It's an incredibly complex model. I know it really well.
Okay.
But it's not a good model in my opinion. That model is great for businesses that can switch off power when the energy markets go into a crisis. And we were the first broker in Australia that was working with Flow Power, and they have never won a tender with us because they were always, one, they're variable, the rates vary or the month to month. But even when you take their forecast, and all their fixed costs, they're very expensive really as a retailer.
So Flow Power doesn't offer a fixed rate, Jess. It's more of a volatile, spot priced, sophisticated model, which is what Ewan was explaining there. It's very complex and normally a bit pricey for the clients.
We spend a huge amount on electricity, and we're probably going around, I'm going to say 700,000 a year. It's quite big.
Yeah.
So I must admit, I would be interested to see if there is a saving somewhere. So we talk after.
I'd be amazed if there wasn't, Jess, with those numbers.
Yeah. Anyway,
so in terms
of,
thank you.
So noting that we're almost at the end of the hour, and this will be recorded and distributed. So the steps now would be for me to send to the original invite list this recording, and encourage people that the next steps would be for them to make contact directly with you, Matt, and perhaps suggest a date for that, so you know that there is a time, not to cut off that there can't be future, but just to say to be considered in this first round of your analysis and what could potentially be done at a business level or a potential grouping, and come back to us and give a roundup? Would that be the right way to go?
That'd be great. And there's 2 forms, Joe, which I'll pass through to you, which are the authorities which we need them to fill in and sign and send back to me, that allows us to get that data with a copy of a recent bill for each of their NMIs. But yes, if you could explain that, and I'll give you some information on that, and then they can send those forms back and the bills back to me, and then we can begin to put it together. The one thing I will cover off on is, with all that data, I can also then, after we've done the energy analysis, I'll then come up with some ideas around some high-level energy use analysis to give us some confirmation on where the loads are, any ideas I've got about ways of looking to save, and I'll get feedback talking to your growers, to be honest, because they know what's going on. I'm still learning about fish farming, and then I've created a model to sort of pay me for the time I put in to coordinate all this. There's no fees or costs involved in everything we've just spoken about. The only time I'll charge clients I work with is on a contingency or a success fee, where I'll charge 10% of what we're going to save them in the first year, and I'll cap that at $3,000. And if there's no savings, there's no charges. So if I can find them $20,000 or $30,000 a year in that first year, I'll charge them 10%, which might be $2,000 or $3,000, which seems to be a fair way of doing it. So it's contingent on us being successful, and then once we've done it all, we can sit back and enjoy the cheaper rates. But my next job, Joe, I'll send you those forms we need to fill in, and begin capturing some data, so we can then go to Ergon and get all that data and see what sort of analysis we can create around savings, and then come back to the group that want to participate with the findings. Takes about 4 to 6 weeks as a process.
Yep. Okay. So if I get people to send back the forms, I don't want to stretch it out too long, maybe a couple of weeks for people to respond. And that way I'm sort of not giving myself a huge burden of coordination, and you can let me know if you've had responses, and I can just be the liaison. So.
And by all means, you can put my email in, and they can send them back to me, Joe, to save you handling more paperwork. That's all right too.
Yeah.
And as long as we get 2 or 3 to start with, we can begin the process, and over time we can always drop more in, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any further questions or comments from Justin or Jessica, Chris?
No, thank you.
Yeah, just quickly, can you hear me all right, Joe?
Yes, Justin.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Just quickly, is there any risks or negatives that you could see if 3 large farms that are already on the retail market try and combine together, but their contract dates are out by a year or 2? Is that going to prove extra challenging?
You, do you want to answer that?
Yeah. Just to clarify, so they've already switched from Ergon. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think a few of us are already in the retail market, Ewan.
Yeah. The risks of the retail market, it's the biggest risk is when businesses don't track an energy market, and then they renew 1 month before the contract is due to expire. That is the riskiest way to manage energy, and that's just because the energy markets, something could happen at any time in Australia's energy market. You never know. So right now, if they're staggered end dates, and let's say they're 12 months out or 18 months out, it's the right time to review and look at them now. You fill out the forms, share the data with us. We'll come back to you with the information and energy market analysis, and we'll be able to tell you, you should go to tender now. You could look at securing lower rates for the future, or maybe hold off for a couple of months, and we'll review. The other important thing right now, and I didn't want to get into too much detail in this meeting, due to the renewable energy transition, the retail market has changed phenomenally in the last couple of years. When I used to run a tender 7 or 8 years ago, the energy rates across the whole panel of offers would be 0.1 or 0.2 cents per kilowatt hour. difference, between AGL, Origin, Energy Australia. Fast forward to now, and it's very common that I'll see at the top of my retail tender panel, it might be a rate that is 6 or 7 cents cheaper than the one at the bottom of the panel. And this is all to do with the energy market, the mix of this really cheap daytime power where we've got huge excess of generation versus the nighttime as that sun goes down. So running commercial energy tenders, once you switch away from Ergon or in the process of switching away, and getting as many retail offers as you can has never been so important.
So Justin, my answer is always, we do the analysis and run the tender to get a baseline, which is what Ewan was referring to. And in your case, Justin, we find that if your contracts are, say, 12 months or 18 months out, you may well form the basis of the second subgroup we'll create with other members that are likewise 12 months away from contracting, because obviously your current contracts will stay in force, but we can forward plan what you're going to be looking at in 6 or 12 or 18 months' time, and we'll begin to build a little bit of a second group around your portfolio, which is quite common, because if you're in contracts, you won't be coming off this month, at least not normally anyway. So we still do the same thing. It just means your rates won't change until obviously your end of term, but we start doing the analysis now and we begin to manage up other sites we find that are a bit the same.
Okay. All right, just conscious of time, I'm going to wrap it up, but it seems like there's nothing to lose, and certainly scope for benefit for any of the farms that do want to, even at the very least, to understand that what they're currently being billed is that there's the best they can get. So thanks so much, everybody, for joining, and thank you, Matt, for your time, and thank you, Ewan. It's lovely to meet you as well, and I will talk with you, Matt.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Bye.
Thanks,
Nice to
Ewan.
meet you, Jessica.
Bye-bye.
Nice to meet you. Bye.